Today I want to talk about ChatGPT. This is a video made for beginner who have maybe heard the word, or like maybe they even have like opened a website or created an account, but I don't really have an idea like what is this tool, like how does it work, what is it capable of, and what can you do with that. So if you already like know everything about ChatGPT, you can just turn off now and watch one of my other videos about ChatGPT. I have way more advanced content, but today this is going to be like a basic explanation for total beginners. So ChatGPT is essentially a language model. To give you a good analogy, I want you to think of Lego bricks. And one Lego brick is a specific word. Now, you can take those different bricks and can arrange them in different ways, and you can use the same words to create different 3D objects. Like you could build a house with it, or you could use the same blocks, arrange them differently, and then you can build a car or a ship or a castle or whatever you can imagine. What ChatGPT basically has done, it has looked at how have people used certain bricks or words to construct certain structures or sentences that convey a certain purpose. If it has seen like people using like similar ways of bricks to construct like the same kind of structure, it will be eventually able to understand, well, this seems to be a house. As it goes through millions and millions of sentences, it will find like what is the average of all of those sentences. Now, when it comes to Lego bricks, the average house will probably look something like this. The language model now has a deep understanding of like how sentences can be constructed, and it has compartmentalized language in different areas. It has like basically like the broad average of everything, and it has like also specific parts. For example, how would a lawyer say this? How would a doctor say this? How would an architect explain this? How would like someone working, a mechanical engineer say this? And what would the average of all of those people say this? When you give it a task, like let's say you're asking it a question, what is the capital of Germany? It will predict the most likely word which would follow after this question. So it's not really giving you answers, it's just predicting. So in most cases, people would say the capital of Germany is Berlin, so it would be able to determine that correctly. On the other hand, if it had been trained on like an older version of data set, it might say it's not Berlin because for some time the capital of Germany was actually Bonn. So it's really important to understand what is the training data that ChatGPT has used to build this language model. That's why it will often create wrong answers. For example, it might say, if you ask like who's the CEO of Twitter, it will not tell you it's Elon Musk at the moment because it has a knowledge cutoff on 2021 data. That's when they stopped training it. So everything that happened afterwards, this information isn't available. And as we have discovered, depending on how many articles have been written about a certain topic, it might come with 3 or 4 different CEO names which have been the CEO of Twitter before. So it's really important to understand like when it uses written text as a predictive measure, it will often create mistakes, especially if you're working in a field where knowledge is progressing quite rapidly, and then like information change, maybe something was true yesterday but it's not true today, so you might get wrong answers. This is really important when you're asking it because it only predicts what would most likely to follow something, and if the wrong perception about a certain subject, why something works or what is the best recommendation, has been the most common recommendation, and it will be most likely to predict the wrong answer. Now that you understand how ChatGPT and other language models rely on averages, on understanding language, so they can predict what would be the most likely answer, or like what would be the next following word after a certain question, you have to understand how important it is, what your role is in the content creation process when you want to create something useful with ChatGPT. You have to be the keeper of truth, and you have to be aware where ChatGPT might fail, especially if you're aware there is a certain truth which has been considered the truth or the best approach for a really long time. If a lie or an untruth is repeated often enough, a language model would assume it's the truth because it's the majority answer and therefore the most probable word to follow after a question asking it. When something becomes untrue, like for example, who is the current CEO of whatever company, let's say there's one CEO which has been written about all the time, this might become the current CEO just because like the press has written more text about this obnoxious person. So you have to be the keeper of truth. You have to know what is true and what isn't. And like if it's something important that you don't know the answer to, you have to do your own research. You have to double check, fact check, go on a search and go on Google, go on Bing and find some sources to confirm if something is true or not. And then when you're phrasing your commands to ChatGPT, you have to guide it. And whatever it's generating, like let's say you're asking it like, can you give me some 5 tips how to solve specific problem X? You have to be the one evaluating if that's possible. I've tried this out myself, like asking it how to perform a certain task for a feature that I know exists on Instagram but doesn't exist on LinkedIn. But ChatGPT might make up like a tutorial with step-by-step instructions for a feature that doesn't exist on LinkedIn. So when you are aware of those, you can actually create some really useful content, and you can make your life so much easier using ChatGPT. You have to be the one with the expertise. You have to know what is working. You have to know what is true. If you don't know, you have to do your fact checking and your research externally. You can't rely on ChatGPT, especially for anything that's time critical, because you understand like the limitations of how this language model has been trained. OpenAI might build some like more advanced model to prioritize or deprioritize information after a certain cutoff time. They might create like a special algorithm in the future which is specifically looking for any information to specific job titles or persons, and might just prioritize the most recent information and discard any older information about them, or instruct the language model to only consider the latest available information based on the current year when it gives answers. We are not there yet. At the moment, it's often based on just like probabilities, and there is not like a second layer system on top of it yet. Now, if you follow all of those tips that I just gave you, you can basically give it any writing task. And like, especially when you want to create some content, you can ask it like for content ideas. You can ask it to find some specific information out about your customer, because oftentimes for most industries, most problems are evergreen. The same problems will happen over and over again. Let's say you have like a person like 200 years ago running like a shop selling coffee. The same person has the same issue of getting people into their store. So it's an evergreen problem that businesses need to have ways of getting customers to learn about them and motivate them to walk into the door to buy something. So this is like an evergreen problem. So it's not going to change because the fundamental structure of the problem is always the same no matter what age. Like the methods how to solve it might change, but the problem in its core idea will stay the same. So when you're asking it to perform certain writing tasks, when it talks about evergreen problems, challenges, and solution, you will get very accurate information, because this basically has never changed. It's always the same. The predictions will always work because it has never dramatically changed. Let's say we had like a change in technology, for example, going from horse carriage to having like motorized vehicles. Then the technology is changing, so the different problems will change. Like you no longer have like issues that your horse might get ill, horseshoe might break off. So you don't have those kind of challenges, but now you have like a problem with like maybe the engine might break down, a cable might leak, you might use the wrong fuel to drive your car. You have to be aware of those changes when like the solutions and the problems change. Whenever you're at the frontier of something new or like a unique way that nobody else is talking about, then you have to give this information to ChatGPT if you wanted to create some useful output. I see this myself when I'm creating articles for myself, like because the way I like to solve problems are quite unique in many cases. So when ChatGPT is asked to perform a certain writing task for me, it would not consider my solution as the default answer because I'm not the majority. It would just look what do most people do, and most people usually are wrong. Like especially like when it comes to marketing, the most common approaches often contains a lot of flaws that have been just repeated over and over again, and the more people copy from each other and creating like some top tips for how to do LinkedIn marketing, and then they're regurgitating like the same tips over and over again, so this becomes the new truth. And then when a language model is asked, can you give me some ideas how to do certain aspect of LinkedIn marketing properly, it will just rely on the averages, which is always conveying the wrong tips that actually don't really work and like really not as effective. And my idea, which is more like a random outlier in the big language model, so it would not recommend my tips by default. So when I'm working with ChatGPT, I actually have to give it specific instructions to name the specific tip and the specific method. So what I like to do is I like to outline like my specific knowledge and give that to ChatGPT, and then ask it to take my outline and explain it in more detail. And once you do that, once you give it like a structure and ask it to fill in the blanks in between, it's actually capable of doing a remarkable job. And it's really how you have to see ChatGPT. If you want to get the most out of it, you have to understand its limitations, its capabilities. You have to practice this, and I really recommend that you sign up for an account. And then you have to guide it. You have to learn how to do proper prompt design. And when you give it the correct prompts and you give it details, because you're like, no, I have to give it more information for that specific task, because the most common recommendation is actually not in alignment with what I would recommend or what I would want to write about, then you have to give it to that, and then it will create the content based on your instruction. You get really perfect results. You can, if you want to learn more about this, about how to use it in LinkedIn and how you can develop entire content strategy, you can also check out this program up here about my ChatGPT for LinkedIn masterclass, where I teach you how to develop entire content strategy for LinkedIn with ChatGPT from scratch. And if you want to get more videos about ChatGPT, AI tools, and like how to use this technology to grow your business and your marketing efforts, you also should definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell, smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.